It is so wonderful to see everybody here for this very special morning of reflection, celebration, and the rededication of the Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis Religious School. You know, it was just over a year ago that Gila came to me to talk about how we can mark the 10th Yahrtzeit of our beloved rabbi, teacher, and friend, Rabbi Albert Lewis, and to reflect on the legacy that he and Sarah have left for our TBS family. And thanks to the tireless efforts of Gila and the members of the Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis Rededication Morning of Study Committee, whose names are written on the back of the program, but I want to take a moment just to mention them because they all worked very hard for today. Harriet Baker, Anita Brittner, Sherry Cohen, Debbie Davis, Alan Ettenson, Sue Genauer, Alyssa Ginsberg, Shirley Kanowitz, Sheldon Kerner, Allison Lassen, Michael Lazar, Gila Lewisaites, Tanya Sokolov, Lenore Starker, Karen Wolf, Marcia Yorinks, and Debbie Zimmerman, along with Joel Spector, who always finds wonderful things in the TBS archives. Where are you, Joel? I lost you. Always finds wonderful things in the TBS archives and is able to pull a lot of wonderful materials that you have a chance to see in our videos this morning and also on the table outside as well. I also want to thank Mike Perlow and Perlow Productions for the videos that we're going to see, to Steve Bornstein, who always makes sure that we sound good up here, and also to all of the TBS staff, especially Jill Hamill and Alex Weinberg, who, as always, do such incredible work to put this morning together. Let's all give them all a round of applause for all their hard work this morning. I also want to welcome back Rabbi Lewis and Sarah's children, in addition to Gila and Brian, who we get to see often. Rabbi Shalom and Cindy Lewis are here, who came in from Atlanta, and Shimon and Nora Lipsky are here from Jerusalem. We're glad you could come in for this as well. Along with Rabbi Lewis and Sarah's grandchildren, Jill, Shoshana, Rachel and Sarah, Ellie and Tina, and his great-grandson, Louis, who is with us this morning as well. To all of them, I want to say, welcome home. It is always good to have you at TBS, especially today as we remember and honor your parents and grandparents, our teachers. It's hard to believe that it's been 10 years since Rabbi Lewis passed away. This morning, there are many people here who knew Rabbi Lewis and Sarah for years. You shared simchas with them, learned from them, and were comforted by them. And for all of you who knew them, today will be a wonderful opportunity to reconnect with old memories and old friends. Also here this morning are those who never had the chance to meet Rabbi Lewis and Sarah. And for you this morning, it's an opportunity to learn more about them, the history of our shul, and to see how the lessons they taught over the course of their more than 60 years here continue to live in our schools and our programs each and every day. And I want to especially recognize our students in the Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis Religious School who are up there in the balcony. Hi, everybody up there. There they are. And also our high school students who are here as well. And our religious school students will be with us for the first part of the program as we rededicate our high school. And then they'll be heading off to do some learning in honor of Rabbi Lewis and Sarah as well in their classrooms with Alex. Our program this morning is organized around Pirke Avot, the teachings of our sages, a collection from the Mishnah, which was one of Rabbi Lewis's favorite texts. Each one of our speakers has framed their remarks and reflections around a teaching from Pirke Avot, and you will find those texts in these program booklets that I hope you picked up on the way in. If not, we can bring some more around. The text that I chose to teach is on the third page of the booklet, just as you open it up, I guess really the second page of the booklet. And it comes from the great second century sage, Rabbi Tarfon, who taught, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, velo ata ben chorin lihibatel mimena. You are not obliged to finish the work, neither are you free to desist from it. I chose this text because I believe it reflects both the lessons that Rabbi Lewis and Sarah taught us, as well as the legacy that they left to us. As I wrote in Temple Talk, I will never forget the first time that I met Rabbi Lewis. It was in March of 2007, my interview weekend here at TBS. And I knew I had done well when Rabbi Lindemann told me on Sunday morning that we were going to go see Rabbi Lewis, who was home recovering from an illness. When we walked into his house, we were greeted with singing. How many of you know that voice that I'm talking about right now? And as we approached Rabbi Lewis, I saw him sitting in his chair, and the first thing that I noticed was on the table right next to him were 3 books, a Siddur, a Chumash, and The God Delusion by atheist Richard Dawkins. And I remember thinking, that's my kind of rabbi. After Rachel and I moved to the community in the summer, Rabbi Lewis and Sarah invited us out for dinner, and we went to Lynn's Kosher Chinese restaurant. In addition to introducing us to the scallion pancakes, which were quite good, they also told us how important it was to go out together and spend time together. Actually, it was Sarah who really drove that point home. Rabbi Lewis just looked at me and shrugged when she said that. But Rachel often likes to remind me of that teaching. And the truth is, Sarah was really wonderful at reaching out to us, and especially to Rachel, to give us advice, to check in, and to see how we were doing. And when our kids were young, she gave us a bag of shul-appropriate toys for them to use during Shabbat morning services, a gift that will be part of the inspiration for our next door bags of shul-appropriate toys that we give out to our families with young children at Shabbat morning services. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. This is just one example of how their teachings continue to inspire us at TBS. Now, during my first year here, I had the wonderful opportunity to speak with Rabbi Lewis every couple of weeks. And there are many, many wonderful pieces of advice he gave me about being a rabbi that stay with me. But there was one that keeps coming back to me and that he kept coming back to, and it was this: you must engage the people. With song, with humor, with questions, with care, whatever it takes, he would say, you must find ways to engage them with Judaism. And this work of engagement is what Rabbi Lewis and Sarah did for more than 60 years for our TBS family. They engaged people on the bima, in classes, at breakfast with the rabbi, in Israel, at ShopRite, in personal conversations, everywhere they could. And by doing so, they brought so many of us closer to Judaism and closer to God. And their work is not yet done, and really never will be done, as it becomes incumbent upon each subsequent generation to engage their community, to connect and to care for each other, and to inspire the next generation. This is the work that we continue to do today in our shul. What was once a small congregation in Haddon Heights is now a large and thriving congregation in Cherry Hill. Yet our goal remains the same: to engage people, to help our large shul feel small for everyone, to continue to follow the examples of Rabbi Lewis and Sarah, to discuss Torah on Shabbat and holidays, to be there for one another for simchas and sorrows, to love Israel, to provide top-notch Jewish education for people of all ages, to challenge each other to make a positive difference in our world, to do mitzvot, to love one another, to build on their legacy. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin lihibatel mimena. This morning, we remember their work, we reflect on all that they taught us, and we are inspired to carry it on for our own families and our community today. And when we do all of this, we know that the memories of our teachers, Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis, will continue to be a blessing for everyone in our TBS family for all of the years to come. It's now my pleasure to invite up Gila to share a few words of welcome as well.
Good morning. I want to thank you all for being here for such a unique milestone in our synagogue's history. When my father was asked to participate in a rabbinic symposium a few years back, he was asked, "What has given you the most satisfaction in the congregational rabbinate? What has given you the least?" He answered, quote, where is he? Oh, here he is, okay. "From the perspective of 26 years in the rabbinate, I would say helping people change their lives. Being a rabbi, a teacher, has given me the most satisfaction? To answer the question, what has given you the least, I am reminded of the words of the song, "If I'm not with the girl I love, love the girl I'm with." What I'm saying is, I pretty much enjoy most everything that I do at the time I'm doing it. If you were to ask what I believe has given me the most lasting satisfaction, then again, I return to changing people's lives, informing them, and giving them courage through teaching Judaism's message. I spend an inordinate amount of time on adult education and teaching children. Sermons, of course, are another means of teaching, as are articles in the weekly bulletin, end quote. Let me tell you, friends, our Father was very satisfied. The fruits of his labor surround us today in the halls of Temple Beth Shalom, as well as in every single person whose life he touched through his love of teaching, his love of Judaism, and his love of humanity. In order to have succeeded in such a lofty endeavor, he needed a partner who was willing to go the distance, side by side, through thick and thin. His bride, our mother, your Rebbe Sarah, shared his values and helped him achieve his goals. Together, they were the consummate Rabbi and Rebbetzin and created an extraordinary legacy which reflects the very best of Judaism. For me, my brother and sister, there was no distinguishing being Jewish at home, Jewish in shul, Jewish in school, Jewish while shopping, Jewish while seeing movies. Being Jewish was something that enveloped us to our core and guided us each and every day of our lives. That was the way we were raised, and that is the way our parents lived their lives. I remember once when we were eating dinner during the week, and I asked my father to pass something. Instead of simply passing it, he gave a 3-minute spiel about something having to do with the thing that I asked him to pass that I don't remember what it was. And he went on and on. Finally, I said, "Ab, you're off duty. Please, just pass the whatever. You're not in shul." It was my parents' calling to do what they did, and they did it with such grace, class, and excellence. They were loved for it, they were respected for it, they were honored for it, and they will always be remembered for it. They wrote the book on how to be the best Rabbi and Rebbetzin to a congregation. A day does not go by when I don't think about something they said or taught me, and a day does not go by when I try to do something that I know will make them proud. It is written that we are all created b'tselem Elohim, in God's image. Therefore, we all have a tiny spark of the divine in our soul. That is one way that the Lord has guaranteed his eternal presence. If we take that concept and translate it into being a tiny spark of the Lewis legacy, then not only will they live on in our hearts and in the lives of future generations, their infallible spirit will achieve immortality. To all of you who carry that spark, may God bless you for being part of their story. Thank you.
Thank you, Gila. And now I'd invite everyone to direct your attention to the screen behind me for our first of 2 videos that will share memories and spark memories for us about Rabbi and Sarah Lewis, and also have us think about their legacy here at TBS, how it lives on each and every day.
We are here today to thank you for giving all of us your expertise, your guidance, your love, and your patience. We thank you for providing us all with a rich Jewish soul for our school.
To add up all of the students that have come through the halls of Temple Beth Shalom since your arrival would be a monumental task. This fine new building is surely a different environment for learning than was available to the first confirmation class at TBS almost 40 years ago.
They were not only educators on the outside and role models on the outside, but they were also educators within our home. The fact that I have become a rabbi is testimony and testament to their success.
May your love of Torah and Yiddishkeit continue to be an everlasting flame, a ner tamid, in the hearts and souls of every graduate of TBS, young and old, past, present, and future.
Nagid God lecha, L'dor vador we protect this chain. From generation to generation, L'dor vador, these lips will praise your name. Looking back on the journey that we carry in our hearts, from the shadow of the mountain to the waters that would part, we are blessed and we are holy. We are children of your way, and the words that bring us meaning, we will have the strength to say. L'dor vador, nagid God lecha. L'dor vador, we protect this chain. From generation to generation, L'dor vador, these lips will praise your name. L'dor vador, nagid God lecha. L'dor vador, we protect this chain. From generation to generation, L'dor vador, these lips will praise your name.
Yes, I believe in immortality. Immortality is genetically through your children and through the teachings, the impact that each of us have had upon one another. So long as you may, sometime in the future, happen to mention, hey, I heard this from Rabbi Lewis. No matter if there is or ain't something at the other side, I have gained immortality.
Now that memories have been rekindled and others have gotten to see a bit and get a taste of Rabbi Lewis and Sarah's legacy here and how it lives on in our programs, it is now time for us to officially rededicate our religious school as the Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis Religious School. I want to first note that this week, in preparation for today, our executive director, Ron Safir, took clippings from the fig tree that Rabbi Lewis brought back from Israel, planted in Haddon Heights, and then replanted in our courtyard here in this building, and replanted some of those towards the entrance of our religious school. And it's our hope that they will continue to grow by the entrance of our schools and be yet one other way that we can feel Rabbi Lewis and Sarah's presence. When we moved into this building in 1989, Rabbi Lewis sounded a shofar as part of its dedication. Though when we think of the shofar, we tend to think of Rosh Hashanah, it is used in the Torah for a variety of tasks, including gathering the people together for momentous events, like receiving Torah at Mount Sinai, which we just read about 2 Shabbatot ago. And this morning, we will sound the shofar, many shofars actually, to mark the rededication of our Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis Religious School. And for the sounding of the shofar, I would first like to invite up Jerry Siegel, who will be sounding Rabbi Lewis's shofar. And this has special meaning for Jerry, as Rabbi Lewis lent Jerry this exact shofar when Jerry was a teenager so he could learn how to blow it. Just a few years ago, right, Jerry?
Just a couple.
Just a couple. And we know that it worked, as Jerry has been sounding the shofar for us on Rosh Hashanah for many years now. I'd also like to invite up Alex Weinberg, our Director of Congregational Learning, who does an incredible job teaching our students of all ages and overseeing our schools and lifelong learning programs. Alex has worked with our religious school students and Kalman Brown Academy students to learn how to sound the shofar for our Rosh Hashanah children's services. We invite these students up to sound their shofarot with us this morning as well. They are Remy Cherkis, Emily Fine, Zoe Hamill, Aaron Mirwitz, Yael Peltz, Jeremy Radin, Ilana Shanes, Morgan Silverman, and Leo Weiss. And as they prepare to sound the shofar, we'll first sound the shofar, then afterwards we'll recite together the words of Kaddish to Rabbanan, the Rabbi's Kaddish, which will appear on the screen behind me. And we recite this Kaddish both in honor of our learning today, as well as in the memory of Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis. I'll ask everyone to please rise. All right, you ready? Tikia. Shvarim, Trua, Tikia Gedola. Wow. Rosh Hashanah services 2025 are going to be pretty long, I guess. Tell all of our students, I ask you to remain here and everyone to direct your attention to the screen behind me, which is the words of Kaddish Rabbanan are going to appear. It is also in the Sidurim in front of you if you have a Sidur there on page 71. And I'll ask you to please recite it with me. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra kirutei, ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mivorach le'olam omeo maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. Vit hadar, vit ale, vit halal, shemei kudsha brichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Al Yisrael, val Rabbanan, val Tamidehon, val kol Tamidehon, val kol man da'askin bo'raita, diva trahadein v'diva chol atar v'atar. Yehei lahon ulachon shlama rabba, china v'chista v'rachamin, v'chayin arichin mizona revicha, Orfokana min kodam avahon di vishmaya vimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim tovim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael vimru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu brachamav ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael vimru amen. We now have officially rededicated our religious schools to Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis Religious School at Temple Beth Shalom. Mazel Tov and Todah Rabbah to all everyone for their help. You can clap for that. And everyone may be seated. And it's at this point that our religious school students are going to head back to their classes. And in their classes this morning, they're going to be studying a Mishnah from Pirke Avot that Alex has prepared in memory of Rabbi Lewis and Sarah, while our program continues in here. So our learning of Pirke Avot in their memory will continue on throughout the building this morning. And now we'll continue our program in here, continuing to reflect on Rabbi Lewis and Sarah's memory, and I invite up Rabbi Lindemann.
So now we know why it took 40 years in the wilderness. Moving Jews around is never easy. Rabbi Lewis loved to teach. And in addition to Torah, I am quite confident that his favorite text was Pirke Avot. Reflecting his fondness for and familiarity with this well-known rabbinic text, he would refer to it by the term used in the world of the yeshiva in which he grew up. Not the formal full title Pirke Avot, Chapters of the Fathers, not Avot, stressing the sages of the Mishnah whose teachings are contained in the text, rather simply Perek, chapter, indicating an intimacy with the material shared by those who studied and taught the text many times. Rabbi Lewis frequently quoted Perek from memory, drawing upon its ethical precepts to answer inquiries about how one should behave in a particular situation, or applying the insights to elucidate a passage of the Parsha. And I remember well, many times he would come into my office to ask how I was doing, and whenever I responded by saying, busy, he would inevitably quote Perek, the passage that Rabbi Peltz already quoted. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. You're not required to complete the task. V'lo ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena. But neither are you free to desist from it. Rabbi Tarfon's teaching from chapter 2 of Pirke Avot. And sometimes he would sing it. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. He quoted and sang many of the teachings of Perek. Today, however, it is the introduction to the text to which I am drawn, the very first Mishnah of chapter 1. Moshe kibel Torah misinai u'misara. Moses received Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets handed it down to the men of the great assembly. And from there, the generations of sages cited in Perek proceed. But the first teaching is more than an introduction. It establishes a chain of tradition by which the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, essential to understanding the written Torah, is transmitted from one generation to another. Rabbi Lewis was part of that chain of transmission. For him, teaching was both a profession and a passion. He was an educator before he became a rabbi, and as a rabbi, he never stopped teaching congregants and other rabbis. He was a rabbi's rabbi to many of us. But he didn't just teach the text of Perek. He communicated his love for its precepts and values, and he exemplified its ethics. That's what it means to transmit Torah. Moshe kibel Torah misara. Moses received Torah and transmitted it. The word misara has multiple connotations. It's much more than simply passing on a teaching. Musar means ethics. which are conveyed by example even more than by reciting precepts. Preachers say, "Do as I say." Limsor transmission includes, "Do as I do." It also implies faithfulness to the text and teachings which have been received from previous generations. Masoret means tradition. How many times have we all heard Rabbi Lewis sing that from right here? Tradition! Tradition. But when we study the texts of our tradition, we see that each generation did more than merely transmit the past. Each added new insights and applications to the texts of the tradition. And so did Rabbi Lewis whenever he taught Torah and whenever he taught Perek. Rabbi Lewis established a tradition of learning here at TBS. It is his approach to darshaning the Torah portion that we continue each Shabbat, not preaching, not even really teaching. Rather, it's a conversation, a tradition of learning with and from each other as we explore the texts of our tradition together. And that is how Rabbi Lewis transmitted Torah to us. The first teaching of Pirke Avot goes on to quote those of the Great Assembly as saying, "Ha'amidu talmidim harbe," raise up many students. And indeed, we all learned from him. And through this Rabbi and Sarah Lewis Religious School, through our adult education programs, through our Shabbat services, we seek to transmit the tradition, his tradition, to generations to come. But notice now that the phrase used by Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, those of the Great Assembly, is not teach many students, but raise up many students. We were all uplifted by Rabbi Lewis. By his teaching, by his life, he raised our aspirations to love and to learn with and to love people, to learn to love, to live Judaism. As part of that, today we honor his memory by learning Perek, Pirke Avot, with 4 individuals who learned from and loved Rabbi Lewis. His son, Rabbi Shalom Lewis, his friend, Rabbi Bob Laban, his student and partner in maintaining the traditions of TBS, Alvin Stern, and the immediate past dean of the Rabbinical School of Jewish Theological Seminary, where Rabbi Lewis learned and taught, Rabbi Bill Lebeau. And so we begin. Rabbi Shalom Lewis.
I want to say what a joy it is to be here today. It's bittersweet. It's bitter because we are remembering 2 wonderful people who are no longer with us, but it is also sweet because obviously they still are. It's also appropriate that Pirke Avot, as was mentioned many times, was one of my father's favorite texts, and I remember fondly, lovingly, many, many years ago on Shabbos afternoon when he and I would walk back to shul for Mincha Mariv. And it wasn't a long walk, but it was moments that I look back and I cherish when we talked about anything and everything. But when we would get to shul and sit there in the old Beis Medrash on White Horse Pike and Green Street many, many years ago, between Pesach and Shavuot, there's of course a tradition. And that is, as you try to stall between Mincha and the sunset and then finally Mariv, the tradition was to study Pirke Avot. And my father would just open up the text, pick something, and with great talent, with great skill, with great entertainment, teach us during those moments between Mincha and Mariv. What I want to share with you is really more of an introduction, and the punchline is the text that I have selected. I'm a rabbi, the conservative rabbi. My father was a rabbi and a conservative rabbi. but there were differences in terms of how we functioned. And he used to also say that dor v'dor shav, that in each generation, the rabbis, the sages, the teachers would teach and would do things a little bit differently. And so ritualistically, my father and I were different, though of course we served similar communities and had similar passions. My father wore tzitzis, arbakanfot. I do not. My father would wear a kippah all the time. And in fact, with his last breath, not so many miles from here, he passed away. He left us wearing a kippah. I wear a kippah in shul. I wear a kippah when I eat, when I function as a rabbi, when I daven. But I don't wear a kippah all the time. A difference between my father and myself. Also growing up, I would go with friends who are here today to Ponzio's and have tuna, apple pie a la mode, French fries, and a Coke. And that was the meal that I had all the time. My parents never went out to eat unless it was the Blinza in Philadelphia on Market Street or the Ambassador on Girard, 2 milchik restaurants. And then, as the years went by, their positions mellowed a bit when Arthur Treacher's opened up. And my parents said, we can go out for fish and chips. And I told them back then, I said, I understand that you're excited about that, but look across the counter, there's shrimp there also. And somehow they were able to make peace with the fact that the flounder or whatever, the cod, was at a distance from the other stuff. But still, their pattern was not to eat out. I eat milchiks, vegetarian, and so on out. And there are other rituals, though we have similar orientations that are different. But we also, at a certain point, had differences theologically. And I will tell you, I consider myself to be more of a deist, and my father, at a point, to be more of a theist. And this I derive from our conversations and his sense of the Ribono Shel Olam and the dynamic between what was up there and what was down here. Briefly, to teach a little theology, a theist believes God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, can intrude into this world, and might. A deist is somebody who believes God is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, can intrude into this world, but never will. And so my father and I would have conversations about our sense of God, of the deity, and of tefillah, of prayer, miracles. And then in the last few years of his life, I remember he and I had a conversation that went theological and went personal. And in the course of our conversation, I asked him, why did Uncle David die at the age of 47? Uncle David was our beloved uncle, his beloved brother, and he died sadly at 47 in Sloan Kettering many, many years ago. And I asked Ab, I said, why did such a tzaddik, he was a Baal Tefillah, a Baal Tzedakah, a mensch, shomer mitzvot, everything you would want somebody observant to be. And I said, why did he die at 47? And Ab looked at me and he thought for a moment and he said, well, maybe he accidentally ate treif, or maybe he skipped davening one morning. And I said, no, that's not the reason why Uncle David died. And he thought for a moment and he said, well, maybe Uncle David died, or Dud, as he would call him. Maybe he died because he yelled at Aunt Bee when she wasn't deserving of harsh words. Maybe he spanked Sarah, Beth, or Josh when they weren't deserving of punishment. Maybe God was getting back at him. And I looked at Ab and I said, no, that's not the reason why Uncle David died at 47. And he paused for a moment, he looked at me, and he said, as only he could, no, so tell me, why did Uncle David die at 47? And I looked at him and I said, Uncle David died at 47 because he had liver cancer. And in 1969, there was no cure for liver cancer. And he paused. And then I persisted and I asked him, what do you think God's plan is? And he looked back at me again and he said, Nu, you're so smart, you have all the answers. You tell me what's God's plan. And I said, God's plan is for us to find a cure for liver cancer. And he grew silent and he looked at me and he said, that's good. That's very good. And I thought for a moment, we were friends, sons, colleagues. I was a son, he was my father, colleagues. But I thought at that moment, at that very moment, that I was a teacher to my father, and that he was a student, and that he liked that. And so I don't know whether he became a deist, remained a theist. I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is that the text that I would like to focus on and conclude with here is the text that says, Asara Devarim Nivra'u B'Erev Shabbat. There are 10 things that were created after the 6 days of creation and before Shabbos began. And there's actually more than 10, but if you look at them, you will see something in common. Not a single one of them, or every single one of them, is something that is supernatural, that defies nature. It speaks in there of the well that followed our ancestors in the desert for 40 years, from which they drew their water. Wells don't move and wells don't follow people, but this one did. It talks about the speaking donkey and the story of Bilam. Donkeys don't talk. It spoke about the floating letters in the Aseret HaDibrot that also defied rational thought and nature. And when we look at these, we come to understand how our sages were grounded, how our sages had an understanding that there could not be a disruptive, intrusive deity because that would cause chaos. And yet, when they look at the Torah and they see many of these supernatural episodes, they had a problem. How do we resolve them? And the way that the rabbis resolved them in the sacred literature was to say that they were an exception to the rule and that they were pre-programmed at the beginning of creation, in a sense, grandfathered in to ultimate history, or as I like to say, zayded in, or in this environment, sabad in, to Jewish theology. Because on the one hand, they were supernatural events. On the other hand, they recognized that God could not disrupt nature or there would be chaos. And this was recognized thousands of years ago by our sages. And in fact, if we remember just a few weeks ago when we read the Kriyat Yam Suf, the splitting of the Red Sea, it tells us that the waters parted not because of God, but because of Ruach Kadim, an east wind. Even in the sophistication of thousands of years ago, the authors of the Torah understood that it wasn't God's miracles or his supernatural intervention that caused events, but rather nature at a very propitious moment came to the rescue, and that is why events happened. And so when I reflect back on my father and I reflect back on our differences and the many similarities that we had, I don't know whether, again, I changed his mind that moment when we spoke about God and theism and deism. But I do know that there will be a time at some point, hopefully for me many years from now, when he and I have an opportunity to continue that conversation. Thank you.
I feel deeply honored to participate in this wonderful program. My association with Rabbi Lewis and Sarah goes back decades when My family and I lived in South Jersey, and I was a frequent visitor to Temple Beth Shalom when it was located in Haddon Heights. And as indicated in the program, I would like to focus just really on the last line of the passage that is cited here. Havei mekabel et kol ha'adam b'sever panim yafot, which is translated here, greet every person with a cheerful face. And it is supplemented by another passage in chapter 3 of Pirke Avot, cited by Rabbi Ishmael, Havei mekabel et kol ha'adam b'simcha. Greet every person, literally b'simcha, happily. So that's an indication of what the original text is saying, b'sever panim yafot. Being somewhat of a grammarian, I like to point out that sever panim yafot is an idiom, and it requires explanation. One of the sources that I consulted is by a modern commentary on the Mishnah by Dr. Hanoch Albeck, who defines sever panim yafot as befanim sochakot, that is a laughing face. Now, to me, that could mean that either the person's facial expression shows laughter or his demeanor evokes laughter. And that, I felt, was a very appropriate phrase to recall Rabbi Lewis, because I remember very clearly his very special sense of humor. There are other commentaries, one in a modern rendition by the late Rabbi Judah Golden, who was one of my teachers at the seminary. He published a book called The Wisdom of the Fathers, in which he says, "Let a man show a happy face to people so that all people will be pleased with him," quoting a Talmudic rabbi. So this calls to mind a famous song by Tony Bennett, "Put on a happy face." Now, I don't usually sing while I'm speaking, but there is good precedent for it. And one thing that I recall from many years ago, attending a service at Beth Shalom, was hearing Rabbi Lewis in the middle of a sermon sing, "Those were the days, my friend." And I don't remember the context or what his sermon was about, but I remembered him singing that song that was popular at the time, based on an old Russian folk song. And I said to myself, what's he doing? This is unconventional. And I thought of some other events when I attended services at Beth Shalom, particularly a Simchat Torah morning. And there was a man who was called up for his aliyah, and while he was chanting the blessings, he was doing push-ups. And then a very strange thing happened. A group of teenagers who were in the congregation took a length of heavy rope, wound it around Rabbi Lewis, completely around his body, and led him up and down the aisles as if he was a captured animal. And again, I said to myself, what is going on here? How can he get away with that? But that was Rabbi Lewis. And I also, thinking back over those years, I said to myself, did Sarah tolerate that? How did she feel about her husband's behavior on Simchat Torah and other such occasions? Because I remember Sarah as being not exactly prim and proper, but showing a more conventional type of behavior. She also had a great sense of humor. But then I remembered also that Rabbi Lewis had his serious and human side. I remember him asking me to officiate at Gila's bat mitzvah at a Friday night service. He said he wanted me to officiate because he was too nervous and he wasn't sure whether he could maintain his composure. Do you remember that, Gila?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And I officiated that service, and he came up to speak to Gila, but that was about the extent of his participation. So I remember so many incidents and stories that reflect the kind of humorous personality that Rabbi Al Lewis was. He also had a chutzpah, because I know that he traveled to Egypt long before there was a peace treaty between Egypt, and Israel. Who else, what other Jew would take that chance? But he was there and he came back. I have been in the rabbinate a very long time, going on 59 years, Baruch Hashem. In all of those years, I've encountered colleagues of all stripes, but I don't think that I have ever met anyone quite like Rabbi Lewis, and I doubt whether I ever will. He was Yachid B'mino. He was one of a kind. Yehi Zichro Baruch. May his memory be a blessing.
Hillel said, "Be one of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing it, loving people and bringing them to the Torah." When I shared the first draft of my remarks with Jody, she responded that I would need to deliver it slowly. To which I responded, quoting Harav Avram Aryeh Lewis of Haddon Heights in the name of Yul Brenner, "It's a puzzlement." As we think of how Rabbi Lewis lived the wisdom of this Mishnah, we can start with how he represented TBS and the Jewish community to the world around us. TBS was located in Haddon Heights, a largely white Christian community not far from Haddonfield, which was considerably more affluent, but very much a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant area. Haddonfield had a group of clergy known as the Ministerium, which met regularly. Rabbi Lewis managed to join that group, being the sole Jew. He made sure that there was open communication among the various clergy and told us of the Seder he participated in, explaining to the other clergy the significance of the Pesach Seder symbols and how the Last Supper was a Seder meal. Occasionally, some of the other local clergy came to events at TBS, and we could truly see a warm relationship that had developed between them and Rabbi Lewis. One of the more traumatic events occurred in the early 60s. TBS was physically sandwiched between the Roman Catholic St. Rose of Lima Church and School on one side and St. Mary Episcopal Church on the other side of the White Horse Pike. There had been a series of anti-Semitic comments from some of the St. Rose congregants made to some of our congregants. Rabbi Lewis arranged a very public meeting with the Monsignor, and they literally walked around the block in full view of the school children who were outside in the playground of the church. The two were seen conversing, and the message was clear. The rabbi and the Monsignor were friends, and after that, there were no more incidents. Internally, too, Rabbi Lewis knew how to keep the peace among various factions. Of course, originally TBS was completely traditional. Only men accounted in the minyan, and only men received aliyot and could read Torah. As the call for egalitarianism grew, there were choices to be made. Should we become egalitarian at once and risk alienating the traditionalists who were the core of the daily minyan and even the regulars at Shabbat services? Or should we approach this more gradually? Before making any change, he would explain the halakhic issues to the ritual committee, using the opportunity as a teaching moment. Rabbi Lewis wisely chose the gradual approach. For instance, at first, women could receive aliyot only after the first 7 went to men. This led to many weeks with 8 aliyot, but opened the doors to girls having a Shabbat morning bat mitzvah and receiving the maftir aliyah. While this approach proved frustrating to the more liberal members of the congregation, only a very small handful of traditionalists left TBS for Sons of Israel. Who can forget his high holiday sermon when he began with the announcement, "Friends, I am dying, but don't worry, we're all dying. Each day brings us closer to our last day." He then went on to suggest that we renew lost friendships and connect with loved ones we were estranged from. Life is short, he said. Use each day wisely. If you have something to say it now. If you want to sing a song, sing it now. If you want to apologize, do it now. Don't put things off because you never know if the opportunity will present itself again. Rabbi Lewis truly loved people. He was warm, engaging, had a wonderful sense of humor, and spent time with his congregants. Today, when a child has a bar mitzvah, our rabbis speak with the child at the end of the service. But Rabbi Lewis asked questions that put the child on the spot. At my bar mitzvah, I had led the entire service from Birchot HaShachar through Shachrit and Musaf and read the whole Torah portion. When he asked me the first question, I froze. Not a sound came out. I was terrified. Rabbi Lewis, though, to my great relief, quickly said, "You must be tired from all you have done, so I won't ask you to respond, but just listen to me." And I wasn't the only one he covered for. After he became Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Lewis joined the congregation, sitting in his favorite seat back there, on the aisle in the back row, greeting people and participating fully as a congregant. On the high holidays, He would also make it a point to walk up and down the aisles to the social hall and multipurpose room, connecting with those who sat so far from the bima that they often felt they weren't part of the congregation. His presence, smile, and genuine concern for people made them feel connected again. Every Shabbat in his later years, when he came in with his walker and would see me, he would ask, "How are you doing, young man? How's life treating you?" He always had that gleam in his eyes and smile on his face. The third part of the Mishnah is perhaps the most important part of his legacy. He truly brought people to the Torah and the Torah to the people. One understanding of this Mishnah is that it refers to converting non-Jews to Judaism. Over the years, he helped many achieve that, mentoring them and making them feel comfortable in our community. Traditionally, a joy by chooses a Hebrew name, and they use that in the phrase Ben or Bat Avraham Avinu, referring to the original Abraham. Rabbi Lewis felt that using that phrase called unnecessary attention to the individual, so he urged us to drop it and just refer to a convert as Ben or Bat Avraham. In addition, since his Hebrew name was Avraham and Sarah's Sarah, when we started using both Hebrew names, these Jews by choice became his children, sharing the same parental name as Shalom, Ora, and Gila, something I still share with parents when I teach Bima Protocol. For all of us at TBS, the importance of Jewish education is something that is truly the lasting legacy of both Rabbi and Sarah Lewis. They both taught in the Hebrew High program and adult enrichment courses. We have always had an adult education program, education from preschool through elementary and high school. We were a large part of the Midrashah Hebrew Junior College program and send a large contingent to Camp Ramah every summer. TBS members have been involved in the original Community Shuk and the current revival, the Forum. Most essential has been the focus each Shabbat on the Torah study session, with the unique dialogue approach that he pioneered here and taught at JTS, combining the weekly text with current events and making the words of the Torah relevant to each of us on a personal level, a pattern which Rabbi Linneman, Rabbi Peltz, and Rabbi Wexler have mastered as well. One Yom Kippur, before Nila, he gave a short sermonette. He took out a zucchini squash and smashed it against the lectern. His message was that without a strong core of Jewish knowledge, our children could lose their Jewish identity just as that squash fell apart with one smack. It was a visual message no one could miss. In the 60s, we had a weekly junior congregation service where the children led the services and read the Torah. Once a year, Rabbi Lewis turned over the adult service so we could demonstrate our skills. He justified doing this as l'shem chinuch, for the sake of education. Even the halacha prohibiting children from reading Torah and leading services could be set aside for the sake of education. As a child, I would come to shul with my father each Shabbat morning and again for the mincha service. During the summer, he would teach us a Mishnah from Pirke Avot, as Shalom mentioned, in the same interactive style that he used in the morning. It was clear that Pirke Avot was one of his favorite texts. Not only did he teach us and explain the text to us, he truly lived his life according to this particular Mishnah. May we all continue in his footsteps, loving peace and pursuing it, loving people and bringing them to Torah.
Toda rabah, kol hakavod to everyone who spoke. It's absolutely beautiful. Al's chorAl was created to honor the memory of my father and three components in his life that he was passionate about: his love of singing, his adoration for the senior population, and his love for humanity. We are an interfaith choir, and Sunday is the Lord's Day as well. So some of our members were granted a special rabbinic dispensation to go to their church of their choice. Please give a warm and loving welcome to my Al's chorAl family.
Good morning. My name is Anne Marie Mendonça, and this is wonderful Owl's chorAl. I can say from experience that it is such a pleasure to both be here with you all today celebrating Rabbi Albert Lewis. And I can also say it's a privilege to come in every Monday and sing with you all in his honor, and to work with Gila and to meet her beautiful family. So thank you for having us. This is Rabbi Lewis's favorite song. This is Hayamim Holfim. I hope you enjoy it, and if you know it, please sing along. Oh, and on piano is Miss E.J. Park.
Boker Tov, everyone. It's a privilege to be with everyone here this morning, this beautiful morning. And it's an honor to introduce our keynote speaker for the morning, Rabbi Bill Lebeau. First, just a few words about his illustrious career. Rabbi Lebeau was ordained from the Jewish Theological Seminary in 1964, and he spent his first nearly 25 years of his rabbinate as a congregational rabbi. The first 2 years he spent as a chaplain in the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. Then he spent 13 years at the North Shore Jewish Center in Port Jefferson Station, New York, where, get this, during his 13 years there, the congregation under his leadership grew from 60 families to 750 families. And from there, he moved to Chicago, to Illinois, to Highland Park, where he spent 10 years at the North Suburban Synagogue Beth El, a congregation of, I believe, over 1,300 families. In 1987, Rabbi Lebeau returned to JTS, where he served from 1987 to 2008 as the dean of the rabbinical school at the Jewish Theological Seminary, as well as the vice chancellor, and as the chairman of the Department of Professional Skills and lecturer of professional skills. And since 2009, he has served the Rabbinical Assembly as the senior consultant for rabbinic and institutional leadership. In that capacity, he mentors and helps rabbinical students and rabbis in the field, as well as consulting with rabbis and synagogues across the country. A personal note about my relationship with Rabbi Lebeau, and also Rabbi Peltz has a wonderful relationship with Rabbi Lebeau. Rabbi Lebeau was the dean of the rabbinical school when Rabbi Peltz was in rabbinical school. And by the time I arrived at JTS, he was no longer the dean of the rabbinical school. But I remember very early on at JTS, there were actually several people that came up to me, and they just kept saying, if you do one thing at JTS, you need to get to know Rabbi Lebeau. Well, I was a young rabbinical student. I didn't take advice very well at the time, I guess, and it took me a few years to figure it out that people just, his name kept coming up, and it wasn't until my second to last year of rabbinical school that I said, I think I better go meet this guy. I better go see who this rabbi is. And I have to tell you, it changed my rabbinical school experience at JTS and changed my life, entering into a friendship and a mentorship with Rabbi Lebeau. During my last 2 years of rabbinical school, we met regularly, every week, sometimes every other week. He was the person's office who I sat in as I nervously awaited a call from TBS, hoping that I would be offered the job here. And he was the one who I sought out for advice. Rabbi Lebeau and I continue to Skype about every other week, and he serves as a very important rabbinic mentor in my life. Since one of the themes that we're studying this morning is Pirke Avot, the short Mishnah that I would like to share and that I think represents Rabbi Lebeau, and as I'll explain, Rabbi Lewis, quite well, is we learn in Pirke Avot, Aseh lecha rav v'kaneh lecha chaver, that you should find for yourself a rabbi and acquire for yourself a friend. Certainly, words that ring true in my relationship with Rabbi Lebeau, as he has become an important rabbi in my life and a dear friend. And as I was speaking to him in preparation for this morning, he shared with me a little bit about his relationship with Rabbi Lewis, and I think these words ring true in that relationship and that friendship as well. He first met Rabbi Lewis at the Rabbinical Assembly conventions, and Rabbi Lewis, as Rabbi Lebeau shared with me, quickly became a mentor and a friend. He said that Rabbi Lewis and Sarah served as models for Rabbi Lebeau and his wife Beverly, as they were a slightly more senior rabbinic couple, and that he was essential in modeling for him how to shape his congregational rabbinate. And then once Rabbi Lebeau returned to JTS, he was a mentor and a supporter for him upon his return. Rabbi Lewis was last here at TBS for Rabbi Lewis's funeral 10 years ago. It's an honor for us to welcome him back today and invite him to speak now. Rabbi Bill Lebeau.
Brian and Rabbi Wexler, thank you for that very warm greeting. And Rabbi Lindemann, Rabbi Peltz, and entire Lewis family, what a beautiful tribute. What a beautiful, beautiful morning for us to remember Rabbi Albert Lewis and Sarah. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to be here with all of you and to participate in honoring these wonderful, wonderful people who've touched our lives. I met Rabbi Albert Lewis and Sarah more than 50 years ago, as Brian mentioned. It was at a Rabbinical Assembly convention with many, many people around. And my wife and I were just beginning and very nervous about our rabbinate and about our first Rabbinical Assembly convention. And it was the warmth and the openness of Albert Lewis and Sarah Lewis to us that began our journey of a very warm and privileged relationship with them that lasted for all of their lives. And they were, as Brian said, they were our model, our example, our teachers, and our friends. It's so appropriate that they're being honored on this 10th anniversary of Al's death and of our remembering Sarah by rededicating the religious school in their name. For the school represents their commitment to Jewish education and their commitment to this congregation. There's a beautiful teaching in the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, that says, Tovim hashnayim min ha'echad, asher yesh lahem sachar tov ba'amalam. It's better to have two people together than one alone, for there is tremendous reward for the work that they do together. Sarah, to me, was always such a great person. She was perceptive, she was wise, she was a great listener, and she taught always, not only by her word, but by her example. And Al was a master leader. He was an inspirational teacher. But the story of Rabbi Albert Lewis and of Sarah Lewis is the story of the two of them together. As we've heard in so many different ways this morning, Al and Sarah made of life a song. It was a song that in joyous times resonated in the lives of others. And in times of adversity, Al and Sarah's presence together created a refrain of hope. It's obvious this morning that their song, the song of their life that they lived, is still resonating within all of us. I specifically want to dedicate my teaching of Pirke Avot this morning in memory of Al Lewis. Rabbi Lindemann already mentioned the first Mishnah of Pirke Avot, and that ancient mythic picture of the transmission of Torah. And we can see it, as Rabbi Lindemann mentioned. There is Moshe receiving the Torah from God, and then turning to give it to Joshua. And Joshua, looking for some place to give the Torah, gave it to the elders. And the elders gave it to the prophets. And the prophets had to give it to someone else, and they gave it to the rabbis, and the rabbis taught Torah to all the generations to come. Rabbi Tamar Eldad Applebaum, in her introduction to the beautiful new commentary on Pirke Avot, which was created by the Rabbinical Assembly, spoke about this Mishnah. And she said the Mishnah paints a portrait of some Jew in one generation or another generation being handed a treasure made of words and of spirit, and then passing it across time to generations whom they will never meet, and yet to whom they feel a connection of closeness and responsibility. And to me, her words capture the vision of Rabbi Albert Lewis that I loved and that I learned from him. Al took his rabbinate very seriously. And he appreciated always that rabbi was a sacred, privileged title. A title that suggests learning and piety and presupposes integrity and capacity for leadership. Rabbi Albert Lewis had all of those qualities. But even more than that, he was aware as a rabbi that to be called rabbi, he had a responsibility to transmit Torah to his family, to his congregation, and to the generations to come that he would never meet. I want to honor the memory of my friend and my colleague by studying a different Mishnah, the first Mishnah of the 6th chapter of Pirke Avot. And it speaks about a person who loves Torah. Rabbi Meir, who is the author of the Mishnah, I think could have written that Mishnah many, many years ago with Albert Lewis in mind. It captures Al's love for Torah. It reveals what made Rabbi Albert Lewis such a beloved person, and it identifies the rewards that his love for Torah brought to Albert Lewis in his lifetime. I want you to study that Mishnah with me and see if you agree that what I said was true, that Rabbi Meir could have written this for Rabbi Albert Lewis. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir said, Kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma, zocheh lidvarim harbe. Anyone who studies Torah for its own sake merits many rewards. What does it mean to study Torah for its own sake? You study Torah because you love Torah. I can't put the Torah down. I love it so much, I need to study it. But there's another meaning. I study Torah for its sake. I study Torah because I want to make Torah known to other people. I want others to see how great the Torah is. Albert Lewis studied Torah for its own sake, for all the joy it brought to him, and for the urgent feelings that he had to teach it to us. He had to teach it to all of you. And the Mishnah goes on, it says, V'lo od ella shekol ha'olam kulo kedai hu lo. Not just this, but more than that. It would have been enough for God to have created human beings, to have created humanity, just for the possibility that such a person as this would come to live life and apply the values and teachings of the Torah. It's a grand statement. It would have been enough for God to have created the world for Albert Lewis or Sarah Lewis or any of us, and the answer is yes. It would have been enough because perhaps by creating that person would represent the values of Torah and teach Torah and make the world a better place. So, v'lo od ela shekol ha'olam kulo kedai hu lo. It would have been enough to create humanity for the hope that such a good person might live. And what are the rewards that such a person receives from the study of Torah? It says, Nikra Re'ah. He's called a friend. Because we knew that Albert Lewis was so filled with Torah and its values and had such wisdom from Torah, we wanted to be his friend. So he became known as our friend, as we've heard over and over again this morning. The next teaching says if you study Torah, one of the rewards you'll get is you'll become ahuv. You'll become beloved by God and beloved by other human beings. And then the next reward. If you study Torah and you love Torah, as did Rabbi Albert Lewis, Ohev et hamakom, you learn to love God. Ohev et habriot, you learn to love other human beings. Because one of the major teachings of Torah is to see the other person as yourself and to see the other person in God's image. And there are more rewards. Umal bashto anava v'yirah. Torah clothes the person who loves Torah in humility and in reverence for God. The more Al Lewis studied Torah, the more he taught Torah to his beloved Temple Beth Shalom, the more he taught Torah to his family, the more he became clothed in humility, because he understood what it meant to be a human being standing in the presence of God and how humbling that is. But he also understood what it meant to be standing in the presence of other human beings and how humbling that is. And he learned that from Torah. The next teaching, Umachsharto, Liot Sadik, Yashar, V'Ne'eman. As he studied Torah, the Torah gave him the qualities of pursuing righteousness, of being a righteous person, of using his life well, of tending to himself and tending to others. Torah made him a person of integrity, and Torah made him a person who was trusted by all of us who knew him. Umrachato minachet, and Torah keeps a person far from sin. It keeps us on the right track, moving always towards appropriate actions and far from inappropriate actions. Karavto lidei zchut, and it constantly brought him nearer to the acts of kindness that he performed for all of us. And then we also have benefits from a person who loves Torah the way Al Lewis does. V'nehanin mimenu etzav v'tushiyah. We learn from him great advice and counsel, and we benefited from the skills that he had of leadership, of relating to human beings, of teaching, and of understanding. V'notenet lo malchut u'memshala v'chikur din. Because we recognize in him such a person of integrity and of learning of Torah and of embracing its values, you, particularly here at Temple Beth Shalom, you gave to him malchut u'memshala, which means you gave to him the position of leadership. They use here sovereignty and governance. You had the confidence to give him that here at this congregation, the chikur din, so he could help to mediate all of the issues that arose during his years of leadership in this congregation, to make this such a strong and beautiful and loving community, reflecting the love and the care that Sarah gave to all of you. Umgalin lo razei Torah. And here, Shalom, I would say some of your words about your conversations with your father, that his deep knowledge of Torah revealed to him some of the inner meanings that he struggled with. But one of the things I know that I learned from him, and Gila, that you spoke so beautifully about him, I learned from him that even though each of us has some sense of what Torah means, we should never stand too long in that one place of saying that's what Torah means, but saying perhaps that's what Torah means. And perhaps as we continue the conversation about Torah, we'll learn more. But because he loved Torah so much, many of the secret meanings, the inner meanings, the varied meanings of Torah were revealed to him, and all of us who knew him were privileged to share from that deep learning. V'na'aseh k'mayan hamitgaber u'chanahar she'eno fosek. A person who studies Torah, their energy stays with them till the last moment of their lives. And again, just hearing the descriptions not only of the vigorous days of Al Lewis's life, but of the closing days of his life. He was still growing and still learning. He was like a well that constantly has its source of water renewed, and like a river that never ceases its flowing. Even to the last moments of his life, he was thinking and growing and having life enhanced by his knowledge of Torah. V'hevet sanua v'erech ruach u'mochel al elbono. And always, despite the great regard we had for him, the honor we gave to him, he remained a humble person, a patient person, and a person who could forgive insults, a person who could deal with controversy and could have people take opposite opinions and not be offended, but learn how to take that person's thoughts and ideas and turn them into a conversation and make it a basis for a growing friendship as opposed to controversy and a separation of one person from another. Gadlato umromamto al kol hamasim. All of this love for Torah, the study of Torah, the last sentence says, raises that person up above all other creations. This is not a statement about arrogance. It's not a statement about a person being better than another. But it goes back to that idea that creating the world for the chance that there would be one person, and hopefully we would all become like that one person. We would learn from Al and from Sarah and their example and become like them. Then there is the hope, the hopefulness that we should have. The songs that they sang together, the times I also heard Al Lewis sing a sermon and sing a pasuk and sing a verse from the Torah. It was about never losing hope that with such people inspired by Torah, a world inspired by the values of Torah, that world could become a place of beauty and peace. So that person gets held up above all others as a reminder never to become pessimistic, to lose hope, but always, always to be inspired by the hopefulness that the world can be improved and repaired. This was the message of Al Lewis to me, of Sarah Lewis to me. I'm grateful I was touched by their lives, inspired by their examples. May we also continue to be inspired by Rabbi Albert Lewis and by Sarah Lewis, and have hopefulness and sing their songs. May their memories always be for a blessing to all of us.
I want to thank Rabbi Lebeau and Alvin and Rabbi Lehman and Shalom for sharing those beautiful words and reflections and teaching about Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis. And now, as we move our program to conclusion, we will ask to direct your attention to the screen once more. We'll have a look back on Rabbi Lewis and Sarah and their lives and some incredible moments that they shared with us.
כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד
מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו,
We began this with tens of people, and then we went to dozens of people, and it ended up with hundreds of people involved. Now that's tradition. That's a congregation.
והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. והעיקר, 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 לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל.
So, friends, with great thanks, I beseech you to please love one another, talk to one another. Don't let trivialities and stupidities dissolve friendships. I wish you well. And I hope and pray that God, who does exist, will grant you all health, creativity, and a feeling of immortality if you live that way. Shalom, shalom. It's been a great experience.
So once again, I want to thank everyone who was involved in putting this incredible, moving, wonderful program together for this morning. And now that we've had a chance to reflect, we're going to do Hamotzi in a moment, and then everyone's invited to the Friedman Social Hall for brunch. And on your way there, you'll see, as you probably saw on the way in, there are a lot of wonderful artifacts and pictures about Rabbi Lewis and Sarah, and there are also cards on the tables with questions to help you trigger some memories and conversations. And it's our hope that as you come and you eat together, it's also an opportunity to share stories and memories of your own about Rabbi Lewis and about Sarah as well. We are so happy to have everyone here and so proud to be marking Rabbi Lewis's 10th Yahrtzeit with the rededication of our schools, Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis Religious School. And to conclude today, I'd like to invite up Rabbi Lewis's grandchildren and great-grandson to come on up to lead us in Hamotzi. Sorry, I didn't bring the card, but it can be okay. All right, come on up, everybody. All right. Someone want to do Niflat Yadayim first?
Sure.
Go for it.
Rachel does.
All right.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Oh my God. Asher kichanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim.
Amen.
Go ahead. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Amen. Toda rabah. Thank you to everybody for coming.
Okay, give it a second.